pigeons have been let loose and we're about to go.
Ready?
All set?
Yep.
Good.
Have we, Michael?
Yes. Welcome everyone. Particular welcome to our guests and anyone in the public gallery. Thanks so much for the staff for coming along, and certainly welcome again to all councillors. We have quite an agenda today, which will start with our half-yearly update from the port. But first, if I could have any apologies. There is none, and we have on Zoom Councillor Laws and Councillor Forbes that will be on Zoom, so welcome to them that they are here. We have no requests for public forum, and there is no one here wishing to be. Just someone wish to confirm that they're happy with the agenda. Councillor Hope, Councillor Wilson, second. No, sorry, seconded.
Sorry, and this comes out of a conversation, it's one I've raised before, and I'm just using this as the starting point. Having an item at the end where we could ask if we wanted papers or a discussion on any item, and it's just we've never had that opportunity. Whether we can add an item at the end of the agenda, so it'd be 11 items for the chair to follow up from the councillors. And I know we haven't done it, but it's other councils do it, and it's one that means we can ask the chair to follow up on issues that may relate to finance. I actually haven't got any in this committee today, but I just want to start putting it on the agenda.
Councillor Wilson, I understand your response, and I think we'd make sure we get that as co-chairs, we get that into our next agenda, and it's probably a very good formula to put into committees. No problem. Thank you. I have a second of Councillor Noon. Those in favour?
Aye.
Just remind members of their duties under conflict of interest, and that is to your discretion, so we'll leave that up to your good judgment. Three gentlemen in front of us on the, I better do this right, on the port side, Mr Connolly, at the helm, Mr Ray and Mr Heslin on starboard side. So I've got that right, sitting from here. Red port wine is best left alone. So
depends which way we're headed.
Yeah. We're going to meet in the middle. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for coming today, and I'll give you the floor to give us your half-yearly report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to be here with our interim report, the first 6 months of the financial year. We have in front. You should have in front of you an abbreviated financial report for the interim period, and also a copy of our customer communication, or our stakeholder communication, I should say, which is called Porto. And we've added that and we've published that on the same day as our interim report, in keeping with our move towards a more integrated reporting process. We wanted to publish some non-financial material at the same time as we did our interim report, our 6-monthly interim report. So that's the reason those two have come out together, and there's some good stories in both of them, which I'm happy to go through in summary right now. Apologies from Kevin Winders, who's in Wellington today. We all feel very honoured that he trusts us to do this without him. Just kidding. He's actually meeting with other port CEOs in Wellington, and at this very moment is in the Minister of Transport's office, along with a number of other CEOs, going through some topical issues with Minister Wood. The themes of today's presentation are, obviously, we're going to talk about financial results, and then we're going to dig slightly deeper into business unit activity. I want to talk about COVID-19 and how it's affected, and how our team and our wider team, and how they have stood up and delivered on that challenge. And then looking forward, just one slide on looking forward for the rest of the year. So on the next page, the group highlights, basically we've had an $18.3 million profit compared to $7 million last year. The cost out program, or the cost reduction program that we set about to do straight after COVID, when we realised we were going to lose our cruise business for a period of time, has been delivered. our property revaluation gains, and this is why that $18.3 million number is so high. This is the first time in many, many years that we've felt the need and to actually revalue our property assets at 6 months. Normally we resist that and do it every 12 months on the basis that we don't know enough about property values at 6 months. But, you know, there's been such a clear spike in property values, and we had a couple of properties in Auckland that were almost finished at last year end, which the revaluation wasn't included. So those two things have resulted in a revaluation gain of 12.5. We've made significant progress on our health and safety critical risk management, which I'll go quickly over for you. We've signed a 35-year partnership agreement with the Maritime Museum in Port Chalmers, which we're very proud of, and as are the trustees of the Maritime Museum. And our interim dividend is maintained at 4.5 million. So this is really the only page with lots of numbers. Our operating profit of 8.4 is down 1.4 from the previous year. But with investment property revaluation and net profit after tax is a strong 18.3. Revenue is lower than last year due to cruise and slightly lower container volumes, but that's offset by it's largely offset by a stronger log business, which, you know, we've had this first 6 months of this year we had full activity in logs. So they were back in business by June 1 after COVID, and they've responded to high global prices with strongest ever export volumes. Results have also been helped by lower operating costs. Because we were concerned about the effects of lost cruise business and we were unsure about what our container and log business was going to be like in the long term, we decided we needed to create some sort of a cost reduction program to bridge that operating earnings performance, and we set out to reduce costs through restructuring. And that restructuring involved introduction of better and information systems that had been under development, and the timing was right to introduce them. Plus, we've had some redundancy and retirements, which has reduced our staff numbers down to I think about a $1.5 million saving in the 6 months. The lift in property values reflects the strength of our property portfolio, as I've just talked about. And the rest of that slide is for you to digest. And of course, there's more numbers in the interim report, which you can look at in your own time. The balance sheet continues to be strong. Equity ratio is now sitting at 84%, which is consistent with the last 3 years, the last 2.5 years. And the bank borrowings are well within our headroom that we have with the bank. I think our headroom at the moment is 110 million. Yeah. Cruise. Significance of this slide is the zeros in the this year column and the large numbers in the previous year column. So we'll talk about cruise some more when we talk about the outlook, but this is basically a very painful outcome of the COVID epidemic. The bulk tonnes, again, I've mentioned already, strength in logs. The fuel number is impacted by the reduction in aviation, largely out of Queenstown. All of the jet fuel for Queenstown was coming from Port Otago, and that's down. The fertiliser and other is, they vary, and I don't think there's any significance in the variation in those numbers, but for timing. Containers, TEU, that's 20-foot equivalent units. Exports are up a little, which reflects the good dairy season and prices that we're achieving, or that our customers are achieving. The others, pretty much, empties and full imports, pretty much the same. Transships are down, and that's due really to variations in our largest carrier, Maersk. They sometimes do their transships here and sometimes in Littleton, and it's just from year to year they vary. At the moment, in the last 6 months, we lost 6 100,000 TEU of tranship. That's when a container might be picked up from, say, Timaru, and it's headed for a port that the Timaru ship doesn't go to. It'll come off at Port Chalmers and then go back on the next ship and be headed away. And we treat that and we charge that like a normal container handling fee. Some good news from MSC. This new service from MSC gives our customers better choice for exports. The important thing about this is that Port Chalmers is the last call in New Zealand, and this again is just reaffirmation of our plan and our attention and our success in deepening the harbour. It means that all these last call vessels are never constrained coming out of our port full. And we're seeing, we've got a Maersk ship, the Rio circuit comes out of our port last, and that ship has been loaded to as high a level as it possibly can and still sails out of our 14-metre channel without any constraints. And this is another example of MSC using us as a last port. And of course, they go around the bottom of Stewart Island and head off to Singapore and Asia. The Maersk ship actually has to go right around the bottom of Australia because the draft through between Australia and Papua New Guinea is too low. It's too shallow for the big ship to go through. So it has to go right round past Perth, and makes our port far more attractive as a last port when it goes that way. This container vessels disruption, everyone's heard about that. We're all feeling it. People are wanting to buy new kitchen sinks and TV sets are finding they have to wait a bit longer. There are more ships that's a map of the LA harbour with all the ships waiting for service. There are more ships waiting there at LA than we have in our port in an entire year at the moment. And the reason for that, it's not because of the Auckland disruption. It's absolutely a global problem. The first and second quarter of 2020, COVID disruptions with ports being closed, manufacturing plants being closed, created a big hiccup in the flow of empties and full containers around the world, and then very strong demand. That coupled with very strong demand in post-COVID world in the third and fourth quarter, meant that there was a big demand for moving products that hadn't been moved in the first two, plus demand had gone up on top of that, and on top of that, empty containers were all in the wrong place because the shipping basically stopped and the movement stopped in the first quarter. So that's the main reason for this global shipping constraint, and the experts think it's going to take another 2 or 3 quarters to actually flush out and get back to normal. Australasia is seeing similar impacts, of course, but smaller, and they've got the same fundamental issue with ships and containers being in the wrong place after the disruption of COVID. But on top of that, there's been industrial action firstly in Sydney and just recently in Melbourne, which I think has just been resolved or postponed. And the last issue, to a very small extent, Auckland have had some handling issues with their automation project and their levels of manpower slightly under what they were hoping. So yes, Auckland has impacted, and Auckland impacts us because we get ships that will sometimes skip Auckland and come to us early, or come to the other ports early, and then others that'll wait and be late out of Auckland and get to us late, and sometimes that whole schedule change. We're normally used to getting like a Rio on a Sunday night, and he's gone by Monday night or Tuesday morning, and then a MSC ship on Wednesday, and it's gone by Thursday. But with these ships getting banked up at Auckland, and some of them deciding to skip Auckland, we sometimes have a week where we have no ships at all, and other times we had a week 2 weeks ago we had 6 ships in 1 week. And when we do get them, they're often too full to take all our containers because everything's been backed up. Tauranga has filled them up, Lyttelton's filled them up, and we've only got like 500 spaces for 1,000 containers, and we have to push 500 to the next ship, and that slows things, and that causes some disruption for us. We've recently been able to negotiate with the shippers to do some of that pushing off in the other ports as well, and so that we're getting our share of the spaces available. So we went from 120% full on our land side, like really clogged up with containers, and we're down now at about 70%, which is, for this time of year, it's about right. So we feel that we're managing it quite well. Our property business, one slide for our biggest division. Rental receipts are up this year due to our growing portfolio. The rental increases take a while to flow through. Obviously, with property prices going up and values going up and demand going up, rentals are also going up. But we have long-term rental contracts with renewal periods and renewal periods, and they don't always follow the calendar, and they could be 2 or 3 years apart. So in the long run, we see rental receipts going up with their portfolio, but most of this rental increase is due to an increased size of portfolio, new assets in the rental program. Our EBITDA is up similarly, and as I mentioned before, our valuation of our property is up 12.5 million from the previous year. You can see that's more than 12.5. That's because we've added property at the same time as they've revalued. So the next slide, COVID, our team and our wider team. We've been defending the border against COVID. We've got about 70 people that are interacting with the ships to a degree that we consider them a risk, and they are tested every 2 weeks. So we have a weekly pop-up testing, and they cycle through every 2 weeks at the cruise terminal, which of course is not being used for anything else. Our team have been fantastic. This whole COVID testing is very intrusive. It's very uncomfortable, and I really wouldn't wish it on anyone to have to do that every 2 weeks.
To do the up the nose thing.
Yeah. We're trying to get switch over to saliva, but I don't think the health department's ready for it yet. There's lots of reasons. We're not sure which one is the real one. The vaccine was begun to roll out in Auckland on Monday, and we will be getting the vaccine next Monday. The reason we're a bit late is because there are three sites for the super low storage. That's Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, and the vaccine that we get down here will be taken out of that low storage and kept refrigerated, and it's good for 5 days after it's taken out from -70, up from -70. So I think they wanted to see how it worked in the sites where they didn't have to move it after it was thawed, and when they have a week of that, and they'll be down to us with a big fridge full of vaccine next Monday, and we will vaccinate all our staff. But testing will continue even after that vaccination, and let's hope we can switch to saliva sometime soon. Okay, so health and safety. Our health and safety strategy has been basically the cornerstone of it has been the mitigation of our critical risks, and things like working at height, man-machine interface, ammonia release, those sorts of critical high impact issues. More than just a sprained ankle and this and that, we've been focusing on the big things, the things that can kill people. And we set out to put processes and new equipment and assets in place to eliminate these critical risks. And you can see from this graph, starting in the middle, when we really started focusing on critical risks in the middle of 2019, we had we'd identified a lot of gaps, and we've slowly closed those up. New gaps appear. The staff sit and talk about these things in small groups and in bigger groups, and if there's a new risk that they identify, it gets put straight on here. The confirmed status of these critical risks means that the processes and equipment and training are all in place, and the whole process has been fully audited by peers within the business before it gets the tick of before it gets to move into the green category.
That's very impressive.
Yeah,
that's a wonderful graph, ACC would be proud.
Yeah, they are. And we had our Safe Plus audit. It's still progressing, but and it's reflected in our Safe Plus, which is the go-to consultant that the WorkSafe are recommending. And so we're very pleased with our progress on this. And
Just
surprisingly,
before you go ahead, could you explain the numbers on the vertical axis on the left? What at the top, it's 1,800 watt.
Count of number of controls that are in place. So there was 1,800 individual controls in place around the critical risks that have been identified.
Tell me what you mean by a control.
So that could be that a seatbelt has to be worn while driving, and that would be a control against a man initiative. Yeah.
the really interesting one is the moving people, when people come back from their workplace to the office building or the cafeteria for Smoko, and the way they move between their workplace and the cafeteria. In the past, they were at risk on a man-machine interface. You know, they were walking down the side of a road that might have been trucks were going down, that straddles were going down. We've now moved that whole walkway round behind, and it's fully protected. It's almost it's not a covered way, but it's totally protected, and they physically cannot get out of that covered of that. So, you know, each one of those installations would be a control, and of course they have to be trained and told where they need to go and how they need to cross the railway line and those sorts of things. They're all controls. I think, you know, man-machine interface was our biggest critical risk, and it's been probably half of those things up there about man-machine interface.
Thank you. That's very helpful, and I agree with Hilary. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So. The Maritime Museum Partnership, people read about it, I'm sure, in the newspaper. We think it's inspired this. The trustees of the Maritime Museum were, you know, they're in a situation where they were spending all their time on things not related to curating and not related to history. Worried about the museum, worried about continuity of their board. You know, as you can see, none of us in that picture, except perhaps Kevin, are looking very young. And we're very concerned about the continuity and the succession of the management of that. So we decided that we should, in return for them granting us the building, we would commit to looking after all of the stuff around the building, paying the electricity, doing all of that stuff for 35 years. In fact, it goes longer than 35 years, but the 35-year partnership is the way that we've described it. It allows the museum to focus on history and exhibits. We've also added a 20,000 grant per annum to try and attract younger management, younger interest in the museum, and we're already getting the museum's already getting a lot of interest from the media that we've had around this. So everyone thinks that the future for the museum is robust, and we may be coming to you in the future with news of a building adjacent to that, which would house our staff, making the existing building available for port operations. But that's yet to come next year. Taroney Beach, that's been a long, slow process. Anything to do with resource consent and local body funding and things is always takes a long time. But we've finally got the resource consent.
Remember the audience.
We've finally got our resource consent, and we're launching the project on the 27th of February, that's Saturday, with a community celebration. There's a barbecue over at Taroney, which a number of the staff from Port Otago are going to. We have to work with Becca to complete the final documentation of the work, and we go to tender for the groins, which are those 3 stone protrusions, very, very soon. And once those groins are in place, then we start pumping sand onto the beach in between the groins. And we've got we're going to use the New Era and a sand pump So the new area will drop sand just offshore where it can, as far as it can go, and the sand pump will take it and spray it onto the beach. And that sand will be carefully measured to make sure it's the right sort of sand, and it's going to stay there. It won't stay there forever, but with those groins there, we're hoping that we can, the odd replenishment every 10 or 15 years will keep it good. Now, the City Council is also committed to creating an amenity near the road, allowing for parking and access to the beach. So they are part of this as well. Other community support, which I'm sure you've heard lots about, and you'll read about it in the Porto in more detail. The Kaputai Lodge Trust, which is a mental health organisation, we've granted them, I think, an electric van. The Wildlife Hospital, again, a van. Community containers we've given out. The Arakanui Eco Sanctuary, we've given them some transportation and some money. And Port Chalmers rowing, swimming lessons, and of course the Maritime Museum. So I think we've been quite active in the community in the last 6 months, and you'll read more about that in Porto. Finally, on looking back, our integrated report last year for our full year talked about sustainability in a big way, and we've continued to make progress on this. Our carbon dioxide emissions calculations are underway. We've got some preliminary numbers. We're using Toitu EnviroCare to do the audit, which is the go-to kind of standard which most corporates are using in New Zealand. We have a project footprint team that are working on ways that we can reduce that footprint once we've measured it. And you can see from the photograph there that we've got, how many is there? 7 new vans. There's 2 more utility trucks on the way that haven't been completed. The fit out hasn't been completed yet. So they're all completely electric vehicles, and they're used for short range transportation around the port and around the district. And looking forward, of course, we're absolutely not sure about when we're going to get back to normal after COVID. There's uncertain economic conditions prevail, as we all know. There's going to be continued disruption to shipping schedules, and the experts think that that's going to last for another 2 or 3 quarters. Strong bulk cargo volumes forecast in the second half. Timber prices are still very high, and there's a lot of activity. And the sort of volumes that we're moving through the port, which is this year is going to be probably 1.2, 1.3 million tonnes, is quite sustainable in the long run. The forests are actually growing at that rate anyway, so they can either leave them there or sell them. And while the prices are like this, they'll be obviously moving them offshore. We expect a solid second half for our property business. Yields are still reducing, therefore values are still going up. We've got a number of lease renewal projects underway in Auckland, which were pretty quiet for the last 2 quarters, and suddenly everyone's rushing in trying to renew because they're worried they're going to miss out. And the demand for industrial properties, where we have industrial properties, is still unprecedented, and we expect a solid second half. And we've got 2 new design build opportunities which we've contracted in Hamilton. That's where a tenant comes to us and say, I want a building in a certain configuration, and I'll need it this time next year or 18 months' time. So we write a contract for a very long-term lease to make sure that we get our payback from the build, and then we build it for them and lease it to them. That's what we did at Steel and Tube here in Halsey Street, or Friat Street, sorry. And this is going. We're doing that now with some of our remaining land in Hamilton. That we started out. A lot of our our lots that we got ready for sale were sold empty. We're now far more discerning and far more keen to use them as investment properties rather than just sell them off as land. So we've got a lot of opportunity to do that because there's still a good residual lot of land at Te Rapa. And finally, we're going to continue our journey on understanding exactly how big our carbon footprint is and what we can do to make that smaller. So that's the outlook for the rest of the year. I think it's positive. I think, you should be comfortable that we're on the right track, I think. So, any questions?
Councillor Deaker.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Logs. Probably a dumb question, actually, Paul, but my memory tells me we've had at least a couple of years now of 1 million tonnes per year.
Yes.
Which is a phenomenal rate of export of logs. I want to know about the supply. Does this mean that, and you made an offhand comment about the forest growing at a similar rate, are we spreading further, do you say, into Southland as our source of log customers? Are we going into Canterbury? Or are we relying on Otago regrowth to sustain this amazing flow of timber out of the region?
Well, the cost of transporting logs by truck to the nearest port is such that they'll always go to the closest port.
Right.
So we're not stealing any logs from Southland or Timaru. And the other question, to answer your other question, yes, the forests are growing at the rate of 1.2, 1.4 million tonnes a year. So at the rate of harvest, they can continue this level of harvest forever on the footprint of forestry that we've got today.
Chucky Turner used to talk about the wall of wood. And it sounds like the wall's still there.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It'll always be there. If they're replanting, they have to replant. The whole emissions trading scheme drives them to replant.
Yeah.
And, it's a 35 or 25-year cycle. And our customers tell us, our logging customers tell us that it's sustainable forever.
Crikey.
That might change.
Councillor Kelleher.
Thank you, gentlemen. Look, absolutely positive report, and delighted to be receiving that. I have a couple of questions, but I think just to commend you on the prudence you've shown within the organisation, and then the effort that you've had to adapt to meet these trying times has been absolutely commendable to you. Two questions. One is around cruise ships, and I'm surprised at the what I think is a relatively small loss in revenue in comparison to the other parts of revenue. Does the effort the port has to provide to cruise ships proportionately match the reduction in revenue? Like, is it now you've got all that free dock space has the port become more efficient in everything else it does because you don't have to have cruise ships tied up there for so long?
Well, certainly our logging customers are happy that the cruise is not there because they were the ones that always got or felt they always got second choice of the berth. And we contracted with cruise ships months in advance, 12 months in advance for certain days. And if there was a logging ship there, because the logging ships are basically spot hires, if there was a logging ship there, it would have to move out for the day while the cruise ship came in. So they were they are very comfortable, and I'm sure they feel that things are running more efficiently without the cruise ship. But the revenue and bottom line that we get from cruise ship is it's significant. And I think our efforts with cost reduction and the shortfall being made up with logs has disguised that a little bit. Like if we just carried on operating the way we did previously, we would be seeing numbers like 3 or 4 million lower earnings than we have on the table here.
It's the loss to the wider economy.
It's our biggest. We do better out of cruise than out of containers.
Right. Thank you. The other question was just around the Hamilton development, which has been really positive, and I guess is reaching, nearing completion, and you're now looking at design.
Yep.
That's played a big part on the balance sheet for a long time, and as that project nears completion, is it likely that more developments in other areas would be considered to sort of, now that you have so much expertise and skill and background in that, to continue that in other areas so that the business continues along that track?
Yeah, well, as we've discussed in the past, we're not discounting, we're not excluding that as a possibility, but we're not actually going out trying to create opportunities. These opportunities come occasionally and you've got to be smart enough to catch them, but you can also get into trouble trying to create opportunities when they don't exist. And we're very, we look back and at the success of Te Rapa and, you know, but we took a lot of risks at Te Rapa as well. And we've got a really strong portfolio. We don't feel that our future depends on another project like that. You know, we're now at Te Rapa trying to use the remaining land, the attractive remaining land as investment properties to keep a rental stream over the long run to, you know, obviously to fund dividends and, you know, because the bottom line, the fact is that the property business is bigger than the port business now, and it's more reliable in its cash flow, and I know that's what our shareholders are looking for. So rushing in and doing another Greenfields 80-hectare development is not high on our radar, but if it comes along, we are equipped to take advantage of it.
Well done, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Scott.
Yes, a couple of points. The first one to echo the comments that Councillor Callaghan said. That big thank you for all the work and the success that you've had in difficult and challenging times. My question is related. My understanding of progress certainly off council support them in that process. Where it's actually got to, I'm not 100% sure. But the reason I'm raising it is the ODT article where a chap by the name of Hammond said he was kicked out of the harbour basin, and the harbour basin and then there was some comment and criticism about Cleary's Bay. Of course, we've got this wonderful harbour and we've got infrastructure in it that one would assume, the community would assume, would be maintained by the people that own the infrastructure in this different part. You have your own harbour plan. What do you think about the community establishing a harbour plan? Any sort of comments so that we can actually sort of actively plan ahead as opposed to scope? Yeah. And finding out he's out in the street.
Well, yeah, you know, and we won't get into the details of Captain Hammond's note, but you know, this is a classic situation where historically a public amenity has been provided by a corporate, and that corporate hasn't maintained it, or has strategy for it is to actually remove it in the long run because it's not commercial. But there's still
the corporate is
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The port.
Yeah.
Who the community owned, by the way.
Yes, but
fair enough.
Yeah, and so then you get that dilemma between who should be funding the public amenity, and Mr. Hammond, Captain Hammond, gave some examples of the service that his friends were getting at Lyttelton, and Lyttelton have embarked on a marina that is commercial, and those people that are getting that service in Lyttelton are paying $15,000 a year for a berth, and Captain Hammond's paying $1,500, and out at Kerry's Bay they're paying $300. So.
Well, it's not surprising when you look at the state of the
It's a matter of whether, we don't believe that spending millions of dollars in a new marina and charging a rental that gives us a return on that is going to attract any customers. And so that there's a gap there in the capital funding, and it's either got to be something that we knowingly do at a loss, or a public body funds it.
The question, Mr. Chair, is
Certainly.
Is the development of a harbour plan. Do you think that's a good idea? Do you have?
Oh yeah, the harbour master is Sarah, the harbour master is working on a harbour plan right now, isn't that right? Consulting on that.
We did do some work with the harbour master. I'm not sure that he's progressed it to that. I think we probably need to regroup and have a further conversation about it. But
yeah. I think the place
Very-
for that plan to be pulled together, and I understood that
Yes.
Steve was
Steve was definitely
working on that,
You're
and he's
right.
had a couple of public sessions on
He
it.
has had some public sessions, that's right, but I think Steve's played one role, but we need to probably just think about the broader role of
Yeah,
the
when you
agency.
start looking at capital installations and things like that,
That's right.
the harbour master has got no resources to actually
No.
deliver those. And I understand that.
But the concept of a harbour plan, you're behind that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It should be a consensus between ORC and the harbour master and the DCC and Port Otago, and we have to find a way of making sure that all those parties play their part, and take their responsibilities. For example, we Captain Hammond talked about dredging to some of the private berths. Well, we're not. We're restricted from that. Our resource consent only allows us to dredge the shipping channel. And when the yachting club got their berth dredged, they actually had to get the resource consent themselves. And once they got that resource consent, we dredged it for them. Putting the new era into some of those spots that have been dredged in the past is not a big deal.
That'll all come out.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Congratulations on a pretty solid financial result 6 months into the year, and noting that property valuation does distort the figures a little. And also congratulations to the staff, and we'd appreciate if that is handed down through Kevin, because one team, Port Otago, and whether it's the directors or the person on the ground or whatever, you're all obviously heading in the same direction. And I think that health and safety policy sort of highlights that you've been able to corral everybody heading in the right direction. My question's around the supply chain. You showed the map of 40 odd ships or whatever sitting off the coast of the States, LA or wherever, and I imagine the same situation as Singapore, Hong Kong or wherever else. Does that eventually, the cost of that, does that eventually flow through and have an impact on transport costs or cargo costs, etc.? So how does that handled? Because there must be a huge cost having ships sitting idle with crewed up, etc.
Yeah, it's showing up right in container hire. The cost of export containers now is probably, what, Stephen, twice what it was this time last year? Yeah. In some parts, I read something last night about container shipping costs going up 9 times, 900%. The shipping companies have never had it so good in terms of margin. They're recovering costs and they've got a lot of assets idle, but they've never seen demand like they've got now. And they had the last 5 or 6 years has been sort of surplus capacity, shipping capacity, and low prices, and it's just turned up on its head. So it's showing up in shipping prices. I'm sure that the Silver Ferns and the alliances of this world will confirm that.
Thank you. Councillor Hope.
Thank you. I just want to ask you, gentlemen, are you still bringing lactose? That's always been something you've brought in.
Yeah, we bring it in for
Yes.
Fonterra. Yeah.
And has there been anything else that you've brought in due to COVID that is different from what you've done before? I mean, as you know, these are changing times, evolving times, and there's things you control and there's things you can't control, like the cruise ships. But has there been any more requests, if you like? I know you bring in the lactose, but anything else?
Not really. Our import volumes are only about 5% of our total container movements, and they've been that way for the last 5 or 10 years or longer. We're really an export port, and certainly with all this disruption, you might see some changes, but all the way down here, and I suspect that Littleton's getting more import boxes than they usually get, because they're just getting shifted away from the congested ports. But we're not. We're basically the same levels as we've always been. So
Thank you. And a gorgeous story on the back, isn't it? Here's a Canadian girl come here, loving lifestyle, loving to drive down here.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't realise how lucky we are we?
That's
Near
right.
and a half in Canada to probably a very pleasant drive down here for her.
Exactly.
Thank you and appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hobbs.
Yep. First of all, thanks for the community work. I know that the residents of Kopatai are actually doubling the amount of time they're going out in their van. They love it, and it makes an extraordinary difference for them. I just want to know, and it's back to that harbour plan thing, do we know, it just seems to me that there are more yachts moored in Deborah Bay than there used to be. I don't know if that's true. Yeah. Do we know that sort of stuff? Has there been an increase in either moorings or tied up to various wharves, including in Kerry's Bay, of yachts or boats?
The harbour master would know the quantity of the vessels on the swing moorings. It's not their responsibility.
They're not yours.
Not aware. But I know where you're coming from. You think that maybe people who were previously travelling around the world in their boats,
it just seems to be an increase of numbers and activity.
A lot of the vessels at Kerry's Bay don't move. The number of...
Some of them haven't moved for years.
Yeah, well, some of them are rigs actually on the bottom. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
Very good, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, team. And yes, if you turn the boat way round the other way, I was right.
Very good.
Look, thanks very much for your efforts. In particular, if you could forward back to the staff at all parts of the organisation, that we are particularly impressed with the way they've handled the COVID situation. They are manning our borders. They are constantly going through that threat of COVID. So I think that's something that often goes away lightly because we haven't got that direct infestation down here, but in reality they are exposed to it. So look, we thank them immensely, and we thank you for your efforts, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. That's good. Good question. Good question. So they're really spreading out, aren't they?
And just before we head on to this next section, I would like to, if Kate's listening, are you there? I'd just like to move from the chair that the Regional Council send a letter of thanks to Port Otago for their efforts, particularly around what's been happening with COVID.
Second that.
And we would get the chair to pen that. Seconded, Councillor Calvert.
Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Actually, that is really, because at the beginning in Port, not on the business side, people were concerned and there was,
Absolutely.
stuff going on.
Yep.
And it's really calmed down.
Yep. Yep.
Right. Cool. I learned a lot too about marinas. I didn't know about marinas. And they work.
Kopatai Annex, I'll tell you a story about later.
Be very careful what you say about
I was born there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, because it used to be a maternity hospital.
That's right. I was the first baby born there.
Well, that says a hell of a lot.
Once the nuns took over. Yeah. Well, we better carry on. We're still on the first page. But thanks for the report again. So we move on to item 6.1, which is the confirmation of
I'll
the
move
minutes.
both those.
Councillor
6.1
Calvert
and 6.2.
and Councillor Wilson moving both minutes. All those in favour?
Aye.
We have our actions report. Any comment on those? I'm just logging back in, sorry, my computer's timed out. Please. Do this. Oh, yeah, I'm back through on there, and actions, and now we move on to the activity review. Which We welcome Mr. Donnelly, Mr. Rossler. Not letting me open it up.
Like 27.
Nothing here. You're right under the fan.
Is that what it is? No, she's right.
My coat, Marion.
I'm just going to go back for a minute.
It's all right.
No. Yeah, I am.
Cold.
Like my coat, Marion. Like my coat.
Not yet. Well, I could only put in one arm.
Just one moment. One moment, please, caller.
There you go.
Anyway, right now it's 20 degrees with light wind.
Oh, yeah.
Chair Malcolm, can I ask you a question?
It's crap. I don't know.
So certainly, now that I've sorted my computer out.
And your birth history, thank you. If you just go back to the action register and you've got the first one at the top that's in green, now it's got completed and overdue, does that actually now mean that's completed? So I don't mean to be disrespectful, but do you think, even though it's got a date, would it be possible to put just completed? It does, but
Yeah, the bracket is.
okay.
It's,
So yep. So right. Okay.
yeah. So it says completed would. So it's completed on that date. If it was still overdue, it would have a parenthesis around it. Yeah.
Okay.
Happy?
Yep. No. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Spector. It's all right. Yep. Appreciate that.
Corporate team. Welcome, Jasmine, Mr. Donnelly, Mr. Rosler. I will leave this for, we have a recommendation that it will be required, but if you firstly take us through the report, it would be excellent. Thank you.
So Jasmine will step through the cover report. Thank you, Chair.
This is great.
So this report is on operational performance by significant activity for the period ended 31 December, so Q2.
Excuse me, Jasmine, I'll just get you to pull your mic closer if you can, or someone can help that.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. So the overall performance, the 2021 annual plan contains 25 levels of service statements, 49 measures and 63 targets. All those targets relate to activity to be delivered in the 2021 year. For Q1, the majority of measures of measured levels of service targets were on track, and those not on track were identified at the 25 November meeting. For Q2, results are largely on track again. We have 52 results on track, 7 that are either not on track or may not be achieved at year end, 3 that will not be achieved, and 1 that has not been measured yet, so that's scheduled for later in the year. In terms of the financials, the operating deficit of 6.3 million compared to a budgeted deficit of 6.8, so a positive variance of 526,000. That's a result of spending less than budgeted, 6% less, and also receiving less revenue than budgeted. So although the overall financial variance isn't significant as a whole, there's in individual significant activities, there are some notable variances, particularly flood protection and consent processing. So performance against the levels of service, 52 targets are on track. The changes from Q1, there hasn't been a huge amount. We've had grey to green, so biodiversity eco fund reports come to council, so that is now on track. Regulatory, the pollution incident marine oil spill training occurred in December, so that's on track again. State of environment monitoring results, previously due to staff changeover, they were off track, but those are now staff are up to date, and that is green. Movements away from green, the low emission transport study and climate change is possibly delayed. That's the transport team are working with transport teams at other councils, so that may just slow that down. So we're flagging that yellow now. And the reliability of services has not been measured due to the ongoing implementation of software. The data's yet to be, that data analysis is yet to occur. And green to red, the review of the air strategy implementation approach is delayed because of council reprioritisation and the flood protection scheme. The review of the Tyree scheme is bigger than they had anticipated, so it won't be completed by 30 June. You can see a range of variances
Jasmine, could I just
by activity.
Do you have a question particular to a comment then?
Well, just maybe it's easier for Jasmine to go through to the end of this, and then I'll.
Okay, so I won't list them all, but you can see the various variances by significant activity and the magnitude of those there. In terms of the report itself, you can see on the second page of the report it lists the results in quarter 1 and the changes in quarter 2, so you can kind of get a quick picture of where things are at, and I will put it back to the chair for questions.
Councillor Calvert.
I think we've had a very challenging year, and it's impressive that we've got to where we have. I think it's a question, is around consenting, monitoring, enforcement. It's been a huge area, and we've had challenges all the way through, right through the system, and they've been highlighted by $1.2 million on the wrong side of the ledger. To have got to that position while achieving all of our measures seems to suggest to me that the measures aren't right. That, how can we get to have measurements in such a huge, significant, challenging area and overspend 1.2 million, and still we're sort of on, as regards the measures, we're still on track. Are any of these going to change so as that you would get any inkling of what the challenges are that would show up in measures or something?
Mr. Donnelly. Yep.
Yeah, I can answer, and then I'll throw to Sarah. Yep. These are the levels of service targets and measures that are in the annual plan and have been through their LTP. So we are looking to change those, and we've got a workshop later today around what they should be going forward. The issue that you say there in the consents area is what you've got is the financials is around the overspend. If you remember, council approved additional resource and expenditure in that area. If you then compare that back to the levels of service and the measures and targets, the level of service is around providing the consenting function and around meeting the statutory timeframes, which of course they're doing. But that's the thing, is that that's the cost of actually making sure that stays on track. So you've got to look at the two together. But and just because there's an overspend in the budget doesn't mean that level of service will not be met. And in fact, the overspend might be the reason why the level of service and the target and measure is in fact met, because the target and measure is not that does not relate directly to any expenditure criteria.
So I see how historically we got those measures, and I totally understand how we've got to the position we're in. However, the question really is, would we be proposing any different performance measures that would give any hint of the challenges that are here and whether we're meeting them or not?
That's the topic of the discussion this afternoon.
At 3:30 this afternoon, we'll be in workshop doing exactly that, reviewing all those measures, and opportunity to express our views and, if necessary, get staff to go back and look at different.
I guess the
we're in train.
The question in public, which
Yes.
is where we are now, and this afternoon will be a workshop to look at things.
Absolutely.
Is there a proposal to change any of those measures? I guess. Has any thought been given to that? To say, yes, we'll talk about this later isn't totally...
Yes, thought has been given to that, and I've worked with managers and GMs around looking at what the current measures are, and I guess coming back to the audit recommendation, which is making sure that our measures are reliable, relevant and understandable so that they meet that audit criteria, which would also meet public concern, I would imagine. So does that help?
Very good. And so this afternoon will be the start of that rethink if required. So certainly they will be we're reviewing it, and then those thoughts and what auditors after as well can be portrayed in that. So thanks for your question. Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Mr Chair. My question's, it's more of operational, relates to the Torrey flood and drainage scheme. It's probably for Gavin. It highlights in here that the magnitude of the program for the review of the Torrey flood and drainage scheme is larger than what is anticipated. So you probably know what I'm going to ask, but does that in any way, shape or form put us in a position where the scheme is not currently fit for purpose, or does this review is more at a higher level rather than relates to the flood event in January?
Through Mr Chairman, yes, it's really the latter. This is a high-level review around current levels of service, whether they're still fit for purpose given development, Dunedin Airport, and looking at the condition of the scheme overall and how it performs. And it is a very complex activity, which is informed by floods. So the recent floods have been both helpful in terms of adding more information to incorporate into the review, but at the same time distracting staff from that activity.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Just following up on that, and I appreciate this is for the first quarter to the 31st of December, there's been an overspend already in the river management, which I think is where flood work that isn't in a flood scheme comes from. Just highlighting, because it was such an extensive flood right throughout Otago, have you got some nervousness about this year's budget for that work to the end of the year or financial year?
Yes, we've had significant unplanned work to do with floods. We've also had the Shovel Ready program, which has required us to advance funding to enable us to get the government contribution. On the other hand, there has been some offsetting by, for example, the project we just talked about, where there has been some delay.
Any further questions? Yes, certainly,
The
Councillor.
question's on anything now, is it?
Yeah,
in terms of the report?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
On page 23 of the report, under actual expenditure versus full year budget, the financial commentary talks about expenditure variances largely due to staff vacancies in science and rural liaison. So does that mean that we are still not at a level full capacity in those two areas, science and rural liaison? It's probably a question for Sarah or whoever.
It's actually probably best answered by Gavin and Gwyneth.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, through Mr Chairman, in respect to rural liaison, we have one vacancy that we're carrying at the moment.
Vacancy question. Science?
Yes.
We have 4 vacancies at the moment in science.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Probably just add to that quickly. Budgeting for this year was done on the vacancies being filled at the beginning of the year. So if they haven't been filled at the beginning of the year, then you get an underspend. Yeah.
Well, we have a recommendation on page 14, which Council receives a Council Activity Performance Report for the period 1st July, December. Could someone move that?
Move, Mr.
Councillor Noon, seconded Councillor Hope. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And we'll move on to item 8.2. Desmond, thank you, Michael. Yeah.
It's really clear.
This is Sarah, isn't it?
That's right. Good.
Works.
Yeah. Oops. Good morning, Sarah. We have the Finance Quarterly Report, and if you could just go through that, Mr. Donnelly and Sarah.
Yeah, I'll throw to Sarah if she's got any comments. But obviously, the report we just had, the activity report, has some financials in it. It's a slightly different view of the quarter than these reports. So the financial, or the profit and loss, or comprehensive income and expenditure that you see here is how we have to report in our year end from a statutory point of view. So it actually only focuses on operating expenditure, whereas the previous numbers you saw by activity are operating and capital. So it's what you're seeing here is a slightly different view, but basically the theme is very much the same. So if you're just wondering why some of the numbers might be a little bit different, that's the reason why. And this does give a lot of the same commentary on where things are underspent or overspent. So you will see, a lot of similarity, but they are based on a slightly different view of the numbers. And then this report, being purely financial, of course, goes on to outline the balance sheet position and the Treasury report. And then at the end of it, we do have a full breakdown of all the activity expenditure, which is the view that you see back in the previous activity reporting, just to give more detail around that. So I don't know if you've got anything to add, Sarah?
Yeah, that's fine.
Nothing more to add. Questions? Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you for that explanation. And maybe this is a question that sort of goes between the two reports, but under paragraph 7, and I just want to tease this out because this is a financial report and you've got the 102 decrease in bus contract ticket revenue due to the $2 fares. That doesn't tell me, and what was reflected in the previous report, was that the numbers have actually gone up. So it depends because it's a financial report, you're reporting the loss, but the patronage, am I correct, has gone up. And if what we're driving at is higher patronage, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah.
The two are separate things. Yeah, you could potentially triple your patronage and have no fare revenue at all. So they're two associated but different things, and that's the balance that you're trying to do. There's a balance between maximising both rather than just getting one at the expense of the other.
Yep. But it also raises the question that if the fares were still high, the patronage may have gone down and there still may have been a deficit.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is whether the high level that you're looking at here, whether you're going to see that would take some more analysis of exactly what's driving it, because patronage isn't just driven by fares, so there's probably a whole lot of other things that you'd probably want to look at and analyse to work out what's driving patronage up or down, or fares up and down.
Absolutely, and that's why I've asked this question, because I think you've given a reason, which I'm not quite sure we've got the evidence yet from that data. And I totally appreciate there's a $102,000 deficit. I would have left it like that rather than saying the cause, because I don't think we've got any of that data to say what the cause is. And I think we're in agreement there. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, we've got an increased deficit from what was budgeted. Does that put us in any advantage in terms of the LTP process?
We've got an increased deficit, so that means if our deficit has increased, it means that increase in deficit, will be funded it means we haven't got the funding via rates or other income or whatever. So effectively an increase in deficit leads to an increased use of reserves.
So we'd be hoping that we would get rid of that by the end of next quarter as such.
Yeah, some of
budget.
it can just be timing around where things are at.
Absolutely.
When you looked at the previous report, because it included the scheme, everything that's funding capital and the use of the other special rating district reserves, we actually weren't too far off. Just on the pure operating, it's not looking as good from this position, but potentially a bit of that is just the timing of how we've got the budget phased, and hopefully a bit of that will come back by year end.
Hobbs.
It's just a straightforward question. It's on paragraph 11, consensus 1 million above budget due to increased costs to process consents. Can somebody explain what those increased costs are? I don't understand it. I'm sorry.
Is it noted there? There's two parts to it. One is you obviously have our own staff, of which counts. The council approved recruiting additional staff for that, and then with any consent, you have our own staff time, and you have any consultants or expert reports and reviews that need to be completed as well. So it's an increase in both of those costs. The cost of consents is our own staff time and external consultant costs.
Sorry, has it got harder to do, the consent process, that we're having to bring in lawyers and consultants?
I don't know, because I don't process consents.
I know that you don't.
It's a very good and concise answer, but that's something we could perhaps investigate through regulatory meeting. And worthwhile to hold that thought.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, out of my left eye, which is generally
I was
good eye.
going weak while you were gazing at the other side of the room.
Yeah, we're better looking.
I was about to move to the next finger because it needed a rest. Thanks very much.
Sorry, Councillor Keller.
Just a question around the STEDs, and we're seeing a decrease of 242k, an engineering grant from Entity A. We were 50-50 on the STEDs, that's correct? So do we also see a proportionate decrease from our input as well?
Yes, it's 50-50 on the road-related parts of the STED, so that's the access way and that kind of thing, and we fully fund the container itself and those other things. So yes, there is an effect on that. What we had here was a significant, the actual cost coming in significantly below budget.
Why was that in comparison to the Brassnooker one?
Market. We tendered this when COVID had hit, and what we saw was significant interest in doing this job at very, very competitive price. So I think it was market conditions at the time of tendering.
Any further questions? We have a recommendation on page 46.
Moved.
Councillor Hobbs, seconder. Councillor Calvert, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. And we move on to 8.22. Oops. I will get faster at doing this.
The only one. Then I have to put
8.3.
thing up so I
Page
can
have we gone to?
read it.
56. 8.3. Not 2.
This is a statement of financial position.
Correct. And Mr. Donnelly.
Okay, so this one's just me. So this report basically has three parts to it. So it's coming to you now a month ahead of obviously the consultation document coming to you for approval, because the financial strategy, i.e. how we actually are proposing to slice up our funding options, is a key part of the LTP and what will form the options in the consultation document. So attached to this is a draft of the financial strategy. It is very draft. We don't have the numbers finalised yet, so big parts of some of the parts with the graphs and the various numbers on things are missing. But having said that, it's a small part of what's in the financial strategy itself. What is in there is the narrative and the key messaging around how we're proposing to deal with the, if you like, the financial challenge that we've got heading into the LTP. And that's outlined in there around the current year rates offset that we didn't fund, and the government expectations and the increase in expenditure that's going to flow from that. So the key things that the financial strategy outlines around that is how we're looking to bring in external debt for the first time. We're looking at increased dividends, and we're looking to utilise our reserves to hopefully come up with a funding increase via rates that will be affordable and sustainable for the community. And that will come in the next meeting. That'll come in a month's time with the CD, and obviously an update of this financial strategy based on whatever feedback we get from councillors now. So, as I said, that's very draft. Also, as part of alongside the financial strategy and what's being proposed and will go into the consultation document, so we wanted to make sure that councils had the discussion on these two, is the introduction of two new targeted rates. One is a new targeted rate for biosecurity, and the other one is a new targeted rate to fund Lake Hayes remediation. So again, details here around what that is about, and gives examples of what that means from rates point of view, etc. The purpose of that is that way council has endorsed what we'd be putting into the consultation document, and obviously here this information can be put alongside the consultation document as supporting information on our website, so there's more detail, because what we can provide in the consultation document itself is fairly limited. So those two bits of it is we want to council to discuss and, if it's of the mind, approve the introduction of those two new rates and the preferred option that would be outlined in the CD itself. So that's the summary of why this paper is in front of you today, bearing in mind that the next step is that a lot of this will come to you in a month's time when the CD is brought in front of you for approval.
Just a point of clarity before I go to Councillor Wilson, then I think Councillor Hobbs was next. So this will form documents that will be available for the community at consultation time. And then these will need to be approved before we actually, prior to adopting the long-term plan in June.
Yep.
Is that correct?
So what will happen is when the consultation document goes out, that's the document that we release, that we're consulting on, yeah? And part of the legislation, the Local Government Act, says that we can't just attach and send out full copies of strategies and other plans, or the LTP, a draft LTP. So what will happen is these documents will be finalised as a draft, but they will be publicly available if people wanted to, and people can refer to them. That means that then, as we go through the consultation, depending on what comes out of the consultation process, some of the things in like the financial strategy or in the LTP or the other policies like the infrastructure strategy might get amended. Those documents will then they have to be approved before the LTP is approved. So that means the final version of those are approved basically at the same meeting the LTP is, just immediately prior to the LTP itself.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I've got two questions, and I'm going to ask the Lake Hayes one first before the biodiversity, because they sort of, I think, relate to each other. If I went to table 4.4 in the report about the geographic distribution of benefits to Lake Hayes, so you've got Lake Hayes 40%, Lake Hayes South 30%, District Queensland Lakes District 15%, and the region Otago 7.5. They're all exclusive of, so I'm presuming Lake Hayes gets 40, and then you look at Queensland Lakes it's the other people in Queenstown Lakes that will be charged the 15. You don't get double or 3 times the rate, do you? So someone living in Lake Hayes will only pay a contribution to the 40%.
Oh, yeah.
No, they pay as a general ratepayer as well. Yeah. So the way that it works is you've got a targeted. So you've got your targeted rate is actually the 40 and the 30. Yeah. The rest of it, the other 30% is charged via general rates. So if you're a general ratepayer in the district, yes, you're paying that percentage the same as every other general ratepayer. So they pay both. They pay as a targeted direct beneficiary, and they pay as a general portion. And that's the way that it works with every other targeted rate scheme that we've got, because it would be
like the Leith Flood Protection Scheme works like that.
Yeah. So if you're in the Leith Direct or the Leith Indirect, you're still paying a share of the Leith that is in the general rate as well, because general rate is applied to a wider group and to the administration of trying to remove people who have already paid a targeted benefit would be, I'd have to employ another 100 people.
No, sorry, I that's fine. I just wanted, I'd misread, obviously, the way the report was done, the Costello report, and that's why I'm just making sure that I've read it. Then my next question, if I may, is the interesting thing with the Lake Hayes is we're quite sure where the benefit is going because we've got that report. In the biodiversity, as we look at these, will the work program for the biodiversity be available, biosecurity, sorry, be available so people can see the benefit, where the benefit areas are for that work?
Well, the one of the attachments that's there, if I have a look, so if you go to attachment 3 is the funding calculation.
Lake Hayes.
No, I'm talking about now.
Biosecurity.
81.
Yeah. So 8.3. Yeah. Is that page 81? Is it? It's page 84 of your agenda and diligent. So that's the funding formula calculation under the plan. So it shows the year one proposed amount of 3.3 million and where it's split over the various pests and the type of activity. That's the and those percentage splits align to how the pest management plan outlined it. So you can see there, this is there where we've got that. It basically shows that based on that, you can see it's 49-51, so essentially 50-50 rural regional. So this is what we've used for that 50-50, which is option 3, and that gives that. We've then actually, that option is not the preferred one. We're actually saying it would be easier to go with the middle option, where it's just targeted across the whole region based on land value, and we wouldn't have to do this calculation every year. It would, if we do this calculation every year, things might move around, up, down. You'll have the targeted rate and the general rate both moving. The other way will be a lot simpler from an administrative point of view. But if council prefers that we do this calculation every year and we work out what the split is, and then we use option 3 and have the targeted rate for rural and lifestyle, we can do it. It's not that difficult. But the key thing is that I think why we went to the other option is that it would, it will mean that you will get fluctuations that you don't get if we use option 2.
Sorry, I'd seen reference to the attachment. I just couldn't find it. It's a long way back between the reports. Sorry. I now see page 84. I should have gone to. As long as we're referencing that in the plan, that people can see that chart. I think it's important so that they can understand that I'm sorry, I just said, I'm obviously the only one who didn't read it.
Yeah, but that's the
yeah.
reason for having all of this. You know, this is public information, so people who are interested in it can dive into this level of detail and work through that.
I know, and that's great. It wasn't linked. I couldn't find that link to that page, and sorry, I missed it.
Councillor Hobbs is next.
I'm feeling particularly thick, all right? It's talking about biosecurity and the kind of, as I read this, I want to know, the arguments I've heard around this table sometimes say that people have real problems with people on lifestyle blocks, okay, versus the big farms. And so when I was looking at you do a capital value based versus a land value based, which one hits, and also could you define the difference between rural and lifestyle, which one hits the lifestyle blocks? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. It's a classification.
Yeah, I just can't, I'm sorry, I got really confused.
QB classification, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, rural is going to be. Maybe Sean or Sarah knows exactly what's in there, but I mean, lifestyle is generally they're just that. It's a smaller property, so it's a smaller land size. Obviously it's bigger than your urban residential. But it's not being used for farming purposes. So the question of which one hits them the most, it's not sort of really a matter of which one does. If you look at the table that's on page 60, it actually gives it gives a breakdown of all of the land use types across each of the districts. And the key thing is that it doesn't really matter whether it's lifestyle or rural. But as you go through, if you use a CV, a capital value based, like the general rate is, basically because lifestyle and rural properties have a higher CV anyway, so they're paying on average, because their average value is higher, they're paying on average more than an urban residential property where the value's lower. So in that you can see there, usually across most districts, it's roughly under a capital value, so general rate, the rural and lifestyle would be paying about twice what urban is for their average property. Yeah, but their average value is obviously higher for those rural and lifestyle. So that's why it comes. It just comes really purely because of the average value of your properties. So then you go to land value, where then the land value, because they've got more land, if you're using a targeted rate, because they've just got more land, they will pay more. So that reflects that's where the benefit bit is being applied, and that moves the 2 times to 3 times. Yeah, and then you could go to the one where we go pure the full targeted, which is the 50-50 calculation that we just talked about. And that would apply then 50% of the whole amount to be rated would only go to rural and lifestyle properties. And under that scenario on the right-hand column, what that would mean is then rural and lifestyle would on average be paying about 10 times what the residential or other properties do.
Right.
So that's that's the mix of it, and where we've landed is probably the middle one, where it's land value based. Administratively, it's quite easy. It still has a reflection of the benefit as outlined in the pest management plan, but it's not getting into the full calculation that the pest management plan sort of outlined.
I just checked that I've got this right now. Thank you for that. Capital value is the value of the land, And land LV, whatever that is, land value is the amount of the land.
No, capital value is the value of the land and the improvements.
And improvements.
So it's your house as well. And you see that's the
total what you'd sell it for.
Whereas land value is just the value of the land.
Okay.
Yep. So it excludes any houses or properties that you have, on top of that. There is a third option, which would be land area. That wasn't what was proposed in the pest management plan, so we didn't go there. That would probably, if we had done that, that would probably move it, rather than it being 3 times, it would then, it would be somewhere in between the 3 and the 10. So that's the difference.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson again. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, if someone else has got...
No, you're good. No, it's good.
Mine's just highlighted, and I just want to check that we're not the Queenstown situation. Queenstown, all of our land is revalued every 3 years. Queenstown, for very good reasons, on the Queenstown district plan issue and rating the issue, chose not to revalue themselves because it would be just impossible. But actually, at a regional level, it becomes a real question of equity because if their land values have reduced potentially substantially, the ratepayers will be unfairly disadvantaged by them not revaluing in the year against every other regional rate. I'm highlighting it as an issue. I don't know how we could fix it because, rightly put your hands in your head, Nick, but it does have an effect later on when we talk about rating remission potentially.
Yeah. We do fix it. We equalise the rating values. So we go to QV and they provide us an update for the for across the district for districts that haven't been revalued.
Okay.
So what that means is then we apply that equalisation to the whole district. Yeah. So that district, if that district had moved, a huge amount, the overall amount of rates that we're collecting will then be increased, and then it's still divided within that district where it's still essentially the same, based on what the CV splits are or the current the current is. But at least we've recognised that. So for example, there would be if Queenstown has adjusted, it will be reflected through the equalisation. Having said that, whether it has or not, we see the stories. So, but that we equalise for that very reason that all of them are out of cycle. Otherwise, what would happen is, obviously, they'd potentially, if values are going up, you would get away with not paying your increase for a couple of years, and then when you get to the third year, you will have a massive catch-up. Whereas if QV's been providing us the equalisation values, we will have stepped that up in the 2 years, and then you'll just see the normal 1 year when the revaluations are done.
Thank you. Wasn't a dumb question.
Mr. Chairman?
Excellent. Yes. Oh, I'm looking at, that's not Councillor Kelleher's voice. Open to you, Councillor Laws.
Thank you. Can I just, pardon me, clarify that today we are required to choose one of the 3 options, is that correct? For the 2, or that we are consulting or placing all 3 before our constituents and asking them to choose one.
Yeah, so there's 2 rates. Biosecurity has 3 options for funding.
That's the one I'm talking about.
All 3 options will be put in front of the community in the consultation document as consultation items. It's just when we put them in front of them, we're required as under the LGA to have selected one as our preferred option. So that's all we want to do is make sure that we've got that so that that we can do that. But all 3 options are put in front of them so they can, they can tell us whether they like one of the others, or even if they come up with, they think a completely different rating option might be applicable, they could let us know that as well.
So the question I'd be asking if I was a normal ratepayer is, what am I getting from the Otago Regional Council for my biosecurity targeted rate? I assume that we're going to address that question in our consultation document.
Yes, we're addressing that as well, because these funding options are sitting alongside the other part of the consultation item on biosecurity, which is around what level of activity should we do. And what I talked about when we've shown the 50-50 split there, the 3.3 million, that's a step up from where our current level of activity is, which is around 1.9 million. But there was, we've got two options there around whether we, there is a third, but we'll probably end up with just the two, 3.3 million, or we could do even more activity and go a bit faster, which would cost 4 million. And that side of it, i.e. the level of service question in the consultation document, is also outlined. So biosecurity actually has two consultation questions, one of which is around the level of service and what you'll be getting and what, would you like us to do what we're proposing or do more? And the second question is, how would you like it funded?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, are we talking about Lake Hayes yet, or is this just question?
Yeah, same still question time. Yep, you can go have a question.
No
problem.
I've got something to say, but it's not a question. It's just that I'm concerned about. Well, no, I may as well raise it now. I'm concerned about the principle that's been established with Lake Hayes remediation and the funding of it. As I understood Nick in answering Councillor Wilson, I think, Lake Hayes residents will be paying 62.5%. They've got 40% proportion benefit as being a Lake Hayes resident. Then they're also a Queenstown Lake resident, 15%. And then they're obviously an Otago resident, 7.5%. If you add those three together, are they actually paying 62.5%?
No, they're not, because as you go down to the allocations, the number of people who are sharing that gets bigger and bigger. So if you go to the table on page 63 of your agenda, so somebody who is in the Lake Hayes, if you like, direct area, they're going to pay 40% of the total cost in being in that area. There's 290 payers in that area.
Sorry, I understand that, but the point that I'm trying to make is they'll actually be paying more than 40%, won't they?
Yeah, and this that 40% will work out that they pay on average $390. Because they are in the QLDC district, they're one of the 27,000 ratepayers in that district, they'll also pay another $2.34 because they're in that area. Yeah, that's the average, yeah? And because they're also part of the wider Otago region, and they're one of the 119,000 in the region, they'll pay 18 cents because of that. So on average, somebody who's in the Lake Hayes area direct, they'll pay the $390 plus $234 plus 18. But those are the average numbers. It still depends on exactly the portion they will get for the QLDC share and the region share will still depend on how much their capital value is. So it could be higher, but you can see they are paying. They pay the direct, which is the biggest chunk. They still pay an amount for being in the district and an amount for being in the region, but it gets diluted because they're one of a very, either 27,000 or 119,000 in those latter calculations.
Okay, so really, is this the precedent then? Because it seems to set a precedent here that the cost of improving water quality for a regional, even a nationally significant water body, is to be visited upon the nearest residents of that particular water body. So you gave an analogy before, which I don't think worked, and you said, "Oh, well, it's a bit like the flood protection scheme." It's not you. It's Castalia that gave it on clause 37, and it's not at all. there's a big difference between a flood protection scheme and the remediation of a nationally significant water body like Lake Hayes.
Basically, we've done exactly the same. We did economic benefit assessments exactly like this for the flood and drainage schemes, and that's how we've got the splits that we're currently doing in the Tyree and Clutha, and we're applying it exactly the same. The bit that sets a precedent is, and what I've tried to outline here is, yes, we're proposing to do this for Lake Hayes because of the size of and the nature of the work that's being done. The second option that we've got for funding Lake Hayes is that we use the river and water management targeted rate, which each district holds, and a similar piece of work that we've got proposed in the long-term plan, but it's of much smaller scale and it's non-infrastructure, is for Tomahawk Lagoon. So what we're proposing there is that because of the nature of that, it's not infrastructure, it's a one-off, it doesn't continue, that would be paid for via the Dunedin River and Water Management rate. So we have put the second option for funding Lake Hayes would be to do exactly the same, and we're proposing that in this case that would be paid for via the Wakatipu and Wanaka River and Water Management targeted rates. But you know, this is the question. We've got to have a mechanism for funding these things. If you get into large-scale remediation, particularly with infrastructure type assets, of which this has, and it has ongoing maintenance costs, should this be treated any differently than we do with our other infrastructure type assets? But what I'm proposing here, what I'm saying is that it shouldn't.
Okay, right, that's good. And you're a staff member and we're governance and we have to make a policy decision on this. And I'm saying to my fellow governors and
Councillor Laws.
Sorry? What?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me? Hey, yeah, Michael, the point of this, the point of these options put in front of us is for items to go to consultation. So I certainly believe that your views will be valid, and probably at consultation time is the place to lobby both us and our constituents to espouse those views.
I don't agree at all. This is the consultation document that the governance team put out to the community at large, the people we represent. And we have not had the opportunity up until now that I'm aware of to debate what the precedent is for restoring nationally significant waterways. This is not a flood protection scheme, and I will deride any comparison between a flood protection scheme, which offers a particularly tangible economic reward to those protected by it, and a nationally significant waterway like Hayes. It sets an appalling precedent for this council, which means that if other lakes we have to remediate or to improve, protect, or promote or otherwise make better, we decide that we are going to visit that entire cost or the majority of that cost upon those most resident to it. And it also seems to negate the very concept that we are a region. The lakes in our region are the jewels in our crown. They belong to the entire region. It is, in my view, thoroughly wrong to visit the costs of remediating some of those lakes or improving the quality of those lakes simply upon those who are resident around it, or in the majority resident around it. And that is why we need to discuss this issue before you put the consultation document out, not as part of it as basically a fait accompli.
And that opportunity will avail us between now and March. And it also could be part of it. Sorry, Michael, just one moment. And
yeah, sure.
We've yet to put a recommendation So we can, if that forms part of your recommendation and that is successful around the table, that would be so. So your points are taken and noted, and we will move to recommendation stage soon. But we have a couple more questions.
Okay.
Comfortable?
Yeah. Thank
you. Get Councillor Kelleher.
Okay, so we are still in question time. So I guess,
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I guess my question was almost following down the track of what Councillor Laws has just raised, but it really is around why isn't there a third option when it comes to Lake Hayes about rating for this across the entire region? Because when you look at the exponential reduction in cost, which is what Councillor Laws was alluding to around the very much local residents versus then the wider Wakatip Wanaka region, which we're moving from many hundreds of dollars down to $10, and then if that went right across all of Otago, it will be a very minimal amount. When we look at the other one that's always appeared, which is Tomahawk, and if the solutions are going to be in similar cost, then why was that third option not proposed here?
Because if you go back to the financial strategy, council's always taken a benefit-based approach to a lot of these type of things. Look, that could be an option, but then I think that would open up the question as to, well, what about a whole lot of other things? Like when the stadium was done, it was done on the basis that the closer you were to the stadium, the more you paid. So all of a sudden, we're reversing that when the activity that's being done happens to be happening in the other part of the district. So it's a difficult dilemma, as Councillor Laws says, from a policy point of view, of how do you ensure fairness and equity across the region. So yes, whether you wanted to say general rate, but then what happens to how much goes into general rate and what do you end up paying for outside? Now, we have other things where we haven't created a targeted rate, but we use district rates to get over to make sure that we don't have inequity amongst the districts. And there is things that are being funded only by specific districts. Like, for example, predator-free Dunedin is only funded via the general rate in Dunedin. So you would argue, well, is that any different than what you're talking about here? So from that point of view, if I had a third option, it wouldn't be general across the region. It would be general across the district in the same way that we have other general rate activity that only happens in certain districts. Harbour Master was a classic example. It's now gone to central Otago, but previously it was only the coastal districts. So we've looked at where the benefit of the service or the activity lies in virtually everything we have done, unless it's purely regional. But the question is, if council's got a different view that from a policy point of view this is a regional benefit, well, you can still apply that. I haven't put it up because I haven't, based on everything else council has done historically on funding, I haven't seen that as aligned to being a general regional rate funded activity.
Can't respond to that because I'm going to go into discussion rather than a further question. Yeah, okay. So I think I'll save it for discussion.
You've got enough. Thank you. And we had Councillor Scott.
Yeah, just making the point, Mr. Chair, that you said provide options and we'll simply endorse those and go to consultation. Just making the point that we're also doing a preference or a recommendation.
Correct, yes.
Just reminding of that particular point. So
absolutely, yes.
I think what Councillor Laws was going against that preference.
Yes, and he'll have that chance at recommendation. Yeah, no problem at all. Absolutely agree. It was Councillor Hobbs and Councillor Calvert.
Oh, mine was debate, darling, not a question.
Councillor Calvert.
Mine's debate too.
Oh, well, we'll say that.
Turns out. Oh.
Okay, so we have any further questions?
Is Alexa? Oh.
No, she's under control there. Good. Councillor Scott?
I own a lifestyle property and I'd actually like to stand aside for the lifestyle. biosecurity, the biosecurity recommendation number 3. So I was just wondering whether we can handle them separately.
No problem at all.
Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, certainly. So let's move into that phase. No further questions. Have you got a question? Sorry, Alexa. Councillor Forbes.
No, I want to, it's in discussion, so sorry. So when it's my turn in discussion, I'll come in then.
Thank you very much.
What?
It's like a Jemima.
Jemima's up for sale.
Oh, yeah. Right, let's go back to page 56 when we have recommendations there. The first recommendation is 1. Can you put those up on? We just might lose you, Alexa, up on the screen.
Right, that's right.
So the first, could someone move that first recommendation receives this report?
Yes.
Moved by Hobbs, seconded by Hope. All those in favour?
Aye.
Point 2, endorses financial direction and key messaging outlined in the draft, in the attached draft financial strategy. Mover Wilson, seconded Scott. All those in favour?
Aye.
Our third point.
Sorry, I'm against that. You didn't give an against.
Oh, sorry, I should listen more carefully.
Yep.
Those against?
Yeah, I was going to say maybe he was.
Yeah,
if I can explain, I would just, the financial direction does lead towards our overall principle and strategy that we're looking, and I don't think we've fully explored the benefits versus costs and the wider Otago versus targeted rates into lesser areas. I think we're getting that proportionately wrong. So that's my reason for going against that item, point number 2.
so I'll just reiterate that. All those in favour of recommendation 2?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah. And against it. Do you want that recorded?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, yes. Yeah. I'm listening. Could you, Councillor Laws, Councillor Forbes, I am going by verbals on these, so please feel free to. And I did think I heard 2 ayes, but thank you. Recommendation 3.
So is this now when people debate this issue? Because we've only had question time.
Yes, this is debate.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So I've got recommendation 3 there now. So this will be the debate time. Yep.
Thank you. Well, I'll stand aside for that.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Can I just check, Mr. Chair, whereby voting for this, we're voting for option 2? Correct?
To be the preferred option.
To be the preferred option.
Yes, although the other options will be present in the document.
I understand that.
Thank you.
And I'll second it.
We have a mover in Councillor Robertson, seconded by Councillor Hobbs. Discussion.
Now that I understand it.
I'd like to say something if that's possible.
Yeah, we go to Councillor Laws and then Councillor Forbes. Councillor Laws.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but biosecurity is largely about funding our regional pest management plan. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So, if I was a farmer in Central Otago, for example, would be a bit aggrieved about is that I look after rabbits on my property and I look after sheep. And I employ a full-time shooter to do that, or I employ my staff or I do it myself, to go out there and make my economic unit pest-free. But I'm going to be socked the worst by this rate when I am in actual fact enacting the plan. So isn't there an unfairness that those who are actually doing their job, not a problem, even combining in the Mini Toto together for the point and purpose of enacting the ORC's policy, should, as a consequence of those who do not do it, whether they're urban, peri-urban or lifestyle, end up paying the majority of rates. Isn't that inequitable? I ask.
And that's your point of discussion?
It is, and that's why I am concerned that this rather blunderbuss approach to targeting this has the potential to disadvantage those who both have the largest land and are responsible and extraordinarily proactive rural type.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Okay, my point of discussion, I support what councillors Laws and Wilson were saying earlier, so I won't repeat those things, but I do want to say that Nick, I appreciate that you are looking back to other models and systems and trying to get this equitable, but I think it's a flawed model. And I'm concerned that I believe that the Lake Hayes people, the people that live around that area, will see the benefit.
Excuse me, Alexa.
Yeah?
Alexa, we're just doing 3, which is the biosecurity section at the moment.
Sorry, of course. Oh, we are too.
No trouble. Understand it's difficult.
Yeah. Okay, that's all good. I'll wait.
Thank you. We have Councillor Calvert, then Hobbs.
Just very briefly, whatever we do, it doesn't feel accurately equitable. We've got to choose some model that averages something against something. As regards rabbits, we're not going to be out there under our pest strategy killing rabbits, and then other people are going to kill their own, and it's unfair if we charge them for killing ours. Actually, on the whole, we're not doing the destruction of this. We're being a facilitator, or we're being a monitorer, or we're requiring other people to carry it out. So it isn't something where you either do your own and pay your money, or you pay your money and have other people doing it for you. So I will vote for this because I don't think it is what it might seem, which is double dipping from the council's point of view of getting somebody to do it themselves and then charging somebody to do it.
Councillor Hobbs.
Yes, I'll be voting for it, and the reason is, and it's purely selfish, I look at Dunedin City Residential and I'm going to be paying an average of $10 towards something that I never see a rabbit on my property or a wallaby, okay, as against a farmer who's going to be paying $51, and I think they see more than one rabbit on their property. Do you see what I'm trying to say? I take the argument that a person employs their own marksman to do that sort of work and those responsibilities, but this is one thing that doesn't, and yet I'm still paying something towards it. And if I did that if South Dunedin people were going to have to pay the equal amount as to people in Central Otago on this issue, I think there might be an uprising.
Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, no.
Sorry, is there anyone else to enter the discussion first?
Brief comment.
Sorry, Councillor Roberts, I just didn't want to.
Okay, but I support option 3. I think it's important to remember we're not just talking about rabbits. I think there's 48 pests in the pest plan that we've targeted, and a land-based or land-valued rating mechanism. It won't be perfect, but it'd be probably as good as you can get when you consider where the amounts of control that are required across those 48 pests. Some eventually will be impacted in urban and rural. Take Old Man's Beard, for example.
Yep, good point.
And some will be more rabbit or rural focused, i.e. rabbits, wallabies, etc. So it's not perfect, but I think it's as good as we can get.
Councillor Robertson, apologies.
Yeah, I think that's right. You seem to support a lot.
targeted rate.
It's
a land-based.
Recommendation 3.
Oh, sorry.
I just wasn't clear there.
sorry.
I think
Sorry.
that was correct in what Councillor Noon says sums up where I was at as well. So I don't think I need to speak. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Scott, we'll put, there being no further debate, let's put that motion. All those in favour of recommendation 3?
Aye.
Those against?
No.
1 against? And noted?
I'm going to move the next one.
Yes. And please record that Councillor Scott stood back from that debate.
Okay.
Thank you. We move now to carried. We now move to.
Can I ask one question?
Certainly.
Sorry, I've just done very simple maths, and I could be wrong, Nick, but I'm just wondering, given the report came out before we knew what the costs were, and given that we now more or less know what the costs are, that I think the regional and QLDC rates amount to less than 1%. Is there any reason why we couldn't set the rates for Lake Hayes and Lake Hayes South at 1% less, and then they're not, as a matter of principle, because the Costello report is quite clear that they were looking at other areas outside when they gave those percentages. So we set Lake Hayes at 39%, the other one at 29%, and then those rates would be fair and equitable because that would reflect the Costello report.
And I think that will come through the consultation process.
You want to leave it till then? I'm just saying it's
Yes.
quite technical. I'm happy to move that we do this with that very slight adjustment. That then makes it fair and equitable to the report. That was actually a question I just wanted. Does that make sense to you doing it that way? Because if it's 1%.
I think it'd need to be checked.
Yeah, I'd have to. I understand what you're saying. I'd just have to go away and just see what that does and how it works. So, I wouldn't want to say yes just on the fly without having a look at it.
Councillor, I'd be happy to bring that back because I think the rest of us would also need that time to look at those figures. So even if it is simple, I think we'll just leave it at that if you wouldn't mind, and we'll bring that back, I think.
Well, so 2.552, $2.52 is what the Queenstown and the Otago ones amount to, that we're trying to take off and that is less than, I think, 0.6% of the 390 that the Queenstown the Lake Hayes people have to pay. I'm just doing it as a percentage. It just seemed a logical way of dealing with it to make it reflect the report.
I'm happy that you take that further outside of this, I think.
Well, can we do it subject to being? Oh, okay.
Well, you could make you could move a motion.
I was going to move. I was going to move that the 39 that 40% becomes 39, the 30% comes 29, and the rest stays the same. And that stops you having hundreds of staff working the actual maths out.
Have we a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it.
Yeah, not totally.
It's worthy of discussion.
I don't totally understand. My problem is I don't totally understand it.
Well, I think I can explain.
Seconded by Michael Laws.
Yeah. Well, can I explain in seconding it? My understanding is...
Hold, Michael. We're just going to get Kate to revisit that motion so we've got it correctly recorded.
Motion after the number 3.
Yes, it will be.
All right.
So it's in reflecting.
This is to do with 4.
After 4, isn't it?
It's after 4.
After 4. It's part 4 that the numbers be done on table 4.4, which is on page
63.
There. So I've read the Costello report, which is quite clear about them being outside benefits, not adding them together.
Yep.
And if the district and the region rate that is accounted for in the next page are added together to 2.52, the QLDC region, that is, say, It's 1% of the Lake Hayes. It's not 1% of the.
Councillor Wilson, I just wonder if I give you leave to prepare that motion. We come back after we've
Done 5?
Yeah, we'll come back after we've done 5.
Okay.
Nick had something.
Sorry, Mr. Donnelly.
I just did want to add, without sort of the one thing that I can think of as this is trying to go around is we've had the Castalia report and it's provided, you know, the analysis and the numbers that we've used. Interestingly, that's exactly what we've done and we've applied the percentages they've got. So the same thing of people paying as a direct beneficiary and then via either the district or regional allocation for flood and drainage schemes happens. That's how it works, yeah? And what I'm worried about is we start doing this on the fly, all of a sudden you'll have flood and drainage scheme people in here going, why don't I get a discount off the percentage that came in the report that you had? So I'd be very wary about opening this up to doing some sort of your policy setting precedent on the fly when we haven't really probably fully delved into it as much as we should to make that sort of decision.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion because I've realised I've got it wrong for Lake Hayes South. It's more like 4% there. And I will leave it to the submissions.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you for your comment, Mr. Donnelly. And so we are on item 4. And Councillor Robertson?
We've had questions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Moved, seconded by Councillor Calvert.
I just wanted to
debate.
This is picking up the debate that was had before. This way of working for things that are nationally important has been done before. And if I look at Lake Taupo, there, of course, there was a big lot of government money went in to do that work, but the work also went region and district, and there were allocated amounts in there, so that the people around it, other than, we just take out central government at this stage, the people around it, around Taupo, actually paid proportionally more than the people in Hamilton did. The people in Hamilton still complained. So, I mean, I just think it's, I accept it that the people who are living immediately around Lake Hayes, their dogs are now going to be able, once we get this right, to go into the water. One, I don't have a dog. 2, I won't be up there 365 days a year with the dog going. Do you see what I mean? The benefit to the immediate people is much higher than the national benefit. And that's why I particularly like this particular option.
Look, my 2 Zoom people, would you both check that you're on mute? Would be good. We're getting quite a bit of interference, probably from Radio Central.
He's got his hand up, but I'm not certain that was historic.
Thanks, Councillor. And did you want to talk, Councillor Forbes? Yes, go.
Okay, I was just trying to unmute. Sorry, it's taking a bit of time here from Jemima's little sister. What I still think, I hear what you say, Marion, but I think that the model itself is flawed. We are saying that environmental issues that need remediation should be paid for by people who live close to it, while we have to remember people who've profited from that. From having a pure resource have now gone. So it's a very interesting scenario, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think that everybody benefits from all environmental restoration, and it's hard to see how that is reflected in this model. It's not like a flood scheme, it's not like the stadium. That's all I want to add to the debate at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Calvert.
The reason I support this is that, again, it is a blunt instrument and imperfect, but when you spread things around more people, one of the effects of a very specific area being spread around everyone is that they can be very keen on having something particular done to their area that they're passionate about, knowing that the cost to them them who are proposing the what could be a Rolls-Royce version of whatever is going to be spread so thinly that it won't cost them anything either way much. We haven't usually spread things around everybody, but we do in that when we're spending money in a particular area, but we do things that are sort of equally inequitable or unfair in the sense of, I was always concerned that commercial ratepayers in Dunedin pay a heap of money for the library and they can't even read. If you look at what commercial ratepayers get for their money, it's very little because all of the people who work in those buildings are already paying their rates for living there and for all the things that involve people living in an area. So we do know that we spread them round, just trying to get partially where the benefit lies and partially spreading them a little bit further than that for one reason or another. I reject the national argument because I think that's for the government to decide what proportion it pays into things that are nationally significant. And in fact, we promised when we became councillors to act in the best interests of the people of Otago. And that's our job. It's for the government to think of the whole area. So it's for us to look after our area. So it's our ratepayers that we need to be concerned about. And I think, imperfect though this may be, it's probably the most perfect of the options. And if our people come back to us and say they don't think it's the fairest option we can produce, then I'm more than happy to shift my thoughts on it.
And just the order of hands, Councillor Laws, you're next. You had your hand up on the screen. Just letting people know that. Councillor Laws.
Thank you. I guess my answer to that is, and I'm quite passionate about this, as you know, is that the lakes and waterways of Otago are environmental jewels in New Zealand. And they are, particularly from our point of view, a responsibility that places a very heavy onus upon us all. We are going to do a lot more work around the protection, preservation, enhancement of our lakes and waterways in the years to come. And much of it, as Lake Hayes proves, is long overdue. Lake Hayes is not a stadium. Lake Hayes is not a drainage project. Lake Hayes is a regionally and nationally significant lake that is in trouble. And we have taken too long as a body, but well, we're doing it now, to actually try and improve a lake that is dying. I want to see an option provided to the people of Otago, which we are not doing at the moment, so I would move a motion that one of the options that we need to provide on this matter is that Lake Hayes and other significant lakes and waterways in our region should have any improvements based upon a regional rate rather than the current targeted rates. Because these are jewels that belong to the region, whether you're living in South Dunedin or South Balclutha or Queenstown or Glenorchy. The reality is that those lakes belong to us all. And when we talk about walking our dogs, I've got to be honest with you, that's not what attracts most people to Lake Hayes or to Lake Wakatipu or to Lake Wanaka. It is the beauty of those lakes and their surrounds, their ability to inspire us and to lift our soul, which is what the environment does. And if we're going to say, listen, this is the precedent we're setting as the Otago Regional Council. If we're going to improve this part of the environment, you locals have to pay for it, then you're providing a practical disincentive to actually improve any aspect of the Otago environment. If we're a region I keep getting lectures from my colleagues over the last 4.5 years I've been on this council. I need to think regionally. Then let's start actually funding as a region as well. And for that reason, I would like that option provided in the consultation document that Lake Hayes and other regionally significant lakes and waterways, their remediation and improvement should be funded by regional rather than targeted rates.
We have a motion already on the floor.
So that is an additional motion?
That is correct. Because you've got, at the moment, you've got two options.
It's already on the floor.
Actually, you don't have any option. You've only got one option. That's the earlier option.
So you've got two options.
Yeah, two options.
You've got two options.
No problem.
Two
options. We'll complete 4 first, and if that fails, which yours is contrary to that, we would then put the next motion.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. It's a point of order.
Certainly.
Well, it's clarification. There are two options. I heard someone say there was only one option. On the table at the moment are two options. We are agreeing with, in that document, with option 1. So there are two options that will be put out to the public.
Correct.
You're agreeing that we prefer option 1.
What this motion does, it's an amendment really, it's not a negation. It's an amendment. It provides a third option.
Hang on, option 2 isn't included because...
Yes, it is.
No, point 50 says this option has not been included as an alternative because funding via river and water management rate is not preferred regardless of whether the rate is applied to Wakatipu, Wanaka or just Wakatipu.
That's in reference to why the targeted, the second option is proposing to use the river and water management targeted rates, and there's river and water management targeted rate zone is done by district, except in Queenstown Lakes where there's a Wakatipu and a Wanaka, so it's split in two. What we're proposing there is still to use both of them, so it's across the district. The bit that I say that we haven't actually put as like we've only done a second option, which is to use both of them. We haven't said, you could actually say just use the Wakatipu river and water management targeted rate rather than using Wanaka and Wakatipu.
In the consultation document, will it show these two options?
It'll show two options. It'll show the targeted rate for Lake Hayes, the 40-30% one, and it'll show using the river and water management rates across Wakatipu and Wanaka as the second option. So there'll be two options. When we consult, we've got to provide options. Yep.
So, Mr. Chairman, this then would be an amendment to that by adding a third option.
Yes.
So you could take that first.
Yes.
An amendment.
So are you proposing that as an amendment?
2-4.
I am. So what I'm aiming to do is, you have the motion, I think I've read it a couple of times. You will now have 3 options to put in the consultation document, not 2.
Yeah. Well, I can take it separate.
Yes.
I can do the amendment.
Yes.
Vote on the amendment.
So is the third rate a general rate or is it a targeted rate?
One moment, just before we start discussing that, have I seconded for that amendment?
Yes, I'll second it.
Seconded Councillor Kelleher.
I'm asking, I don't know whether it's a point of order or whatever it is.
Have questions on that?
Whether this amendment is intended to be a general rate for everyone.
Yes, it's intended as a general regional rate. That is correct.
So general ORC rate.
That is correct.
Councillor Robertson.
I'm still unconvinced that it's an amendment. It's significantly different from...
Yes, and I'd have to agree with that on reading it, and that I feel we need to go back and move 4 and...
Could I suggest that we move Michael's as a separate motion first, result of that, and then do 4? Does that make sense?
Otherwise, it will be redundant by.
It would be contrary to the previous motion.
Can I just point of order?
Possibly not. You're adding a third option.
Yeah, we're adding a third option.
Point of order.
Yeah. I'm listening to you, sir. I'm just
Thank you,
nodding
sir.
at you. Sorry, I should have said.
That's all right. No, it is an amendment. It's not a separate. It's not in contrary to the motion. The motion is, how do you fund? Well, the question the motion asked is, how do you fund the remediation of Lake Hayes? So this is an alternative. This is it isn't in contrast to those two. It is asking that a third option be presented to the Otago public via the consultation document. So it isn't in negation.
Councillor Noon.
My view is that the proposed amendment goes way beyond just being connected to recommendation 4, because it talks about significant lakes and waterways. If it talked about an additional option to fund Lake Hayes costs via the general rate, that relates to the discussion we're having, but that goes way beyond. It's far-reaching what's being suggested there. So it's more than an amendment.
Is Tomahawk Lagoon significant?
Councillor Laws. Councillor Laws, I think we do need to narrow that down to a basis of Lake Hayes.
Okay, so
and I understand your.
Yeah. So I
understand your sentiments, but that would form part of your debate. But it needs to be in line with the Lake Hayes debate as opposed to other significant lakes.
Then in that particular case, with the consent of Councillor Kelleher, I'll amend this so that it reads Lake Hayes remediation instead of nationally or regionally significant waterways and lakes. What I'm very keen on doing, just to explain the reason that I would do that, is ensuring that a precedent is not created, which one will be, without us discussing the wider issue.
Councillor Kelleher.
Consent granted.
Comfortable?
Yep, comfortable.
Consent granted. That's very good.
That adds remediation just where you've got your cursor.
Yep.
Improvements funded based on
Consultation document that Lake Hayes remediation, I think, is what he was saying.
Do we have a mover and seconder? Can we will have debate on the amendment. Councillor Robertson, Councillor Scott.
On the amendment, which is now, purely Lake Hayes, so anything relating to Otago goes back to the other one to debate. But basically, we have had some discussion around the Castalia report and principles establishing under the Local Government Act who will pay. Which is the beneficiary. We haven't managed to establish at this point that the entire region is the beneficiary, which takes me to the next question of, if we were going to rate all of Otago to improve Lake Hayes, we would need to think about this in a regional context. If we did that, we would need to prioritise across Otago what our work stream is in terms of improving degraded water bodies. So if we were to do that, we would look at our requirements across Otago, which is to restore all degraded waterways and protect all wetlands. And how, as Councillor Calvert pointed out before, how do we know that things are significant? Well, we would need to involve community in determining what is significant to them, but we also have a requirement to restore all degraded waterways and all wetlands and to prioritise that work stream because it's massive. Would we leap to one particular project straight away and say that it is in the benefit of all of Otago? No, we wouldn't. That is not a fiscally responsible way to deal with environmental management for Otago. So I don't believe we've made a good case for saying that this should be funded general rates, and to it could be included perhaps as a option, but I don't believe in that option myself, so I don't agree with that. I don't think we've established a good reason as to why we would do it that way, particularly that we don't have the data through the Castalia report. I don't have any data here before me that says that that would be a fair way of rating our residents, and it would be contrary in my mind to the Local Government Act to leap to one proposal at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Scott?
Yeah, look, I support what Councillor Robinson's been saying. Paid for, basically. I've heard a number of speakers have said that well, it's not the local people that should be paying for all of it, it's all the people of Otago. All the Castalia report actually confirms is that in fact everybody does pay for it through the recommended option, but in proportion to their benefit. So, you know, the people right throughout Otago region residents are saying, well, their benefit was actually 7.5%, and that's the proportion. So everybody's actually paying. If we establish it as an option, what more information we're really expecting, you know? Leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Scott, Councillor Noon, and then Councillor Deaker.
Castalia have provided an objective and independent, as Councillor Scott and Robertson have alluded to, analysis of the direct beneficiaries and the indirect beneficiaries and the formula for that, justification for that. I think to fund a general rate for this type of work right across the region, I think you would find you would end up with some unintended consequences in terms of the impact on highly valued properties all throughout the region. And I always remember the debate at the Dunedin City Council when we talked about library costs or operational costs. And Maurice Prendergast used to quote a large property in and around Hindon that used to pay, it was equivalent to $2,000 per annum, just associated with your library costs. That person, the owner of the property, was not a member of the library, never went to there was no library at Hindon, no library that he could access. So I think some really unintended consequences would occur of those high valued properties that would be many, many miles away from Lake Hayes, and those particular people would not be benefiting directly, sure, indirectly, based on the discussion we've had about the significance of Lake Hayes, etc. But they're not direct beneficiaries.
Councillor Deaker.
Yeah, I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to issues like this, which is our ratepayers and us, and the way in which we fund projects such as the remediation of Lake Hayes, there are just three questions I always ask myself. And the first one is, who benefits? The second is it fair? And the third one, are we being consistent? Now, I asked those three questions of myself over the last hour of these discussions, and the answer is option one. That is putting the burden on those who benefit most. It's consistent because we have followed exactly the same procedure, such as bringing in a consultant to give us advice on who the beneficiaries are and in what proportions, such as on the Tyree flood and drainage schemes. And is it fair? Yes, it is. Would it be fair to charge everybody across Otago via a regional rate to contribute to the restoration of a small lake in central Otago? No, it would not be. Much as I love Lake Hayes and always have, if it didn't exist, it would have no impact on my life or my economy. So let's get real about this. The option we have is fair, consistent, and the burden falls on those who will benefit, who are those who live closest to Lake Hayes.
Councillor Kelleher.
Sorry, I totally disagree with the last three speakers, with respect. The beneficiary is the lake. We have Tomahawk Lagoon, we have Lake Hayes, we've been talking about these bloody issues for years, and we need to resolve them. To burden the immediate people around it and say that you benefit the most is totally unfair. We are Otago Incorporated, and this is an Otago-wide issue. And when you look at the numbers, and all I'm suggesting in seconding this amendment is that these numbers are put to all of Otago community to decide, and the numbers will become minute when we look at what will be spent in Lake Hayes, but the numbers are substantial when it is targeted to that immediate area, and I think that is totally unfair. So resolving these two issues, which we will resolve one way or the other, I think even having the option to go out to all of Otago and say, do you support this? Because it's there as an option. We're not saying you must do it, but it's there as an option. You can choose. You tell us if you don't like it or not. And it could be it's only $1 or $2, because if it reduces to $10 when you put it across the whole of the Wakatat, what does it do when you put it across all of Otago? It must be a very small number. So I think all of Otago would support it if it was only $1 or $2 on their rates. But I think we need to ask them. And that's why I support the amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
This is a precedent-setting issue, and I'm between. I'm really concerned that we haven't opened up the conversation, as I had to the other day in my video presentation, that Lake Hayes is first, and then we're going to do Tomahawk Lagoon and Lake Tuakatito. Sorry, apologies. Yeah, I'm not going to get there.
She didn't put it in the video.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. Too many. Tuakatoto was one of the versions that I had in my head and everything else. So apologies for my lack of te reo. The issue here is we have a whole lot of work projected. We're only going out on principle with one and setting the principle at that. Tomahawk Lagoon isn't the issue. It is that lake in the near Kaitangata that I'm actually most worried about, and how we share that. We have to get this matter of principle out of not worrying about Lake Hayes, but lifting it up above that as to a matter of principle, whether we share this burden, what is significant and everything else. And I don't think we have done that particularly well in narrowing this down to one project. And so I feel some responsibility having been the lead on the video on this. And so I am actually going to say that we should offer this one up just as a matter of consultation. Because I think it sets in principle, the wording that goes around it I think should be much more different from what is in here. We should actually be saying this is a matter of principle, that we may have to look at a lot of this work. We know we've got this work to do, and as a matter of principle, should this be a general rate, because this will be setting the seed in the future. I think we've half cooked this at the moment, and it's no one's fault, it's ours.
It's Councillor Laws, as the mover. Do you wish to talk?
Thank you. Yes. I just want to endorse what Councillor Wilson said, and that is the precedent that's been created with this decision. And the precedent is shocking. And I think one of the precedents that's unspoken here, but I'll speak it, is that we don't trust the Otago region to have a view on this. All this motion seeks to ask is to the Otago people, listen, Lake Hayes won't be the only lake that we have to remediate, the only regionally or even nationally significant waterway. But we'd like to get a bit of a steer on who you think should pay. And all we've done is provide options that at the end of the day place the burden on those most proximate. It is morally wrong, in my view. But the worst thing to do would be to deny to ask the question, what are we scared of? Are we scared about the answer we might get back from the Otago region? That in actual fact, they are prepared to pay for the regional environmental assets that are in our region in toto? And so for that reason, we should obviously have this as a third option. And the response that we get back, Andrew, in particular, the response that we get back is something that we can then build into all of our policy making as we go forward. And finally, can I answer Councillor Michael Deaker? Michael, I have to be honest with you, you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't, when you come to an issue like this, who benefits most? The question is, should we improve our environment? And if that is the case, we should then just simply go ahead with it. And does it benefit the entire region? It does. This is not a minor Central Otago lake. Lake Hayes has a national, indeed an international reputation. And for us to set a precedent whereby, we're only going to improve those waterways that local folk can most afford is a dreadful precedent to set. Dear Lord, please let's not have any significant waterways, for God's sake, in Otago region surrounded by people of, shall we say, straitened financial means, because we'll never help them. That's the reason why this must be added as a third option.
Through the Chair, can I just ask for clarification, because when I read the possible amendment, it talks about funded based on a general rate. Do you mean, on a regional rate? Do you mean a general regional rate?
That's the question I asked earlier.
Oh, did you? What was the?
I said, is it a general rate, not a target
Because
rate?
it's quite different if you compare, for example, the Wilding Pine charge at $2.30 right across the region. Doesn't matter where you are, but 120 ratepayers pay that. If that is the case, I could live with that. But we're talking general rate, because I've heard the discussion. I certainly focused on general rate, and I assume that's what the point of the amendment was. Am I wrong or right?
Well, the aim is to have it.
You're saying is it,
okay. Do you want me to?
Is it proposed as a uniform annual rate or a general rate?
It is a regional rate.
Wilding Pines. A la Wilding Pines.
Is it on capital value?
Or is it as a uniform annual rate?
Yes, it would be. It's not uniform. It's a capital value.
That's what I think.
Mr. Chairman, it's not an argument. I'm just really worried. I feel I've been listening to the arguments hard and fast, and I'm confused. I'm really sorry to admit this. I don't understand, and I wouldn't mind if staff could answer this question. If we put this option in, and it needs a hell of a lot more fine wording and explanation as to what kind of rate it actually is. If we put this option in, what sort of precedent, I'm not a great lover of precedent, does this set? Is it a dangerous precedent?
So just to be clear, my position, I don't support it if it's a general regional rate.
Right.
I don't support it.
A general regional rate means it sits inside my rates and I haven't got any specific
Capital value.
Where if it's a specific rate like Wilding Pines, that's different.
Yeah, that's good. Could it say general rate if that's what you mean?
What?
Mover?
Why don't we get some advice from that?
Yeah.
Do I want to specify just like Wilding Pines? So in my current,
Okay.
all right.
No, that's
So there's two. There's a few different things. It says up there. It says region. Yeah, it says regional rate. Within having a regional rate, you can have different options. So one is that it could be part of the regional.
Michael, could you either sit up or move your leg?
Yeah.
Can you see all my apologies?
It could be part of the it could just be general rate funded, in which case you wouldn't see it, and it's on capital value. You could then have it as a specific rate, so whether it's in which case, if it's not part of the general rate, it would need to be called a targeted rate. But the targeted rate, as we've just seen with biosecurity, could be applied to everybody. It's then a matter of whether you apply that to everybody across the region on a capital value basis or as a uniform charge, which is what we've done around Wilding Pines. And either way you do will have quite different consequences, as the Chair Noon has pointed out. Because if you do it on capital value, obviously there will be properties a long way from Lake Hayes sitting here in Dunedin somewhere, or big farms down in the Clutha, and they will get quite a large portion of this. Now, how much that might be, we haven't done the numbers, as opposed to if you just divided the rating amount by the 120,000, 119, 120,000 ratepayers, you will be into the region of sort of the few dollars, like we're talking with the Wilding Pines. So it will make a big difference to how people perceive it. Either way, the average, will remain the same. It's only when people would get their rates bill, if you do it on a capital value, that people with a big capital value will go, wow, I'm paying, it might be 20, might be, I don't know how much it might be, whatever, and they might go, that's interesting.
What do you call the Wilding Pines rate?
So the Wilding Pine, it's a targeted uniform
rate. Thank you.
Rate.
It should be called uniform.
Team, look, as chair, I think I'm just going to leave this matter on the table at the moment to get some further advice and to discuss further. We have a council meeting that's due to start at 1. We are constrained with what we've still got to do. We haven't dallied. It's just that these we've given everything due consideration, so I'm very comfortable that we'll reconvene the finance meeting at the end of the council meeting, which will push a particularly important workshop a wee bit further out. But we will do that, and in the interim, please continue to discuss this matter between yourselves to get clarity. We'll just clarify a couple of things with Councillor Laws and with Mr. Donnelly. There are sandwiches in the room, and we're due back here at just a minute before 1.